Hey everyone, y'all look like you've seen a ghost. It's me, alive and kicking. Well, alive at least. That's a classic line from the 1999 film Wild Wild West. Uh, a lot of people hated that movie. I personally enjoyed it. For those of you who don't know, Wild Wild West basically is a cowboy movie that meets steampunk. That alone interests me enough. But we're not going to talk about that. What we're going to talk about is The Last of Us Part 2, which I just finished about an hour ago, and I absolutely loved this game. Absolutely loved it. Okay. And we're going to go into a lot of stuff about it. But first, I want to talk mainly about the game itself. Now, I didn't really at the beginning. I didn't want a sequel to The Last of Us because I played The Last of Us back in 2013. Actually, 2014. That's when I got it, and that was such a fun game. I feel like the game didn't need a sequel. I felt that it pretty much ended on a high note. And then I remember here, and then after you play it for a while, you start thinking to yourself, well, if a sequel did come out, what would it look like? Who would be in it? Why do I keep rocking my head back and forth every time I say something? I don't know. But after a while, I really had decided, I would love if they brought in another sequel. And then a few years later, I found out they did bring in a sequel. And then my mind just blew up because I wanted to know what was going on in the sequel. And finally, when the trailer dropped out, I was like, oh my God, I need to see this. I need to play this game. So I understand that there was a lot of backlash about the game after it came out, and I'm going to talk more into that towards the end. But for now, I'm just going to talk about the gameplay, the characters, the aftermath of the game's release, and then my overall decision. So first off, as I've said before, I love The Last of Us Part Two. I love the first one. So I had a lot of high expectations for this sequel, and all those expectations were not only met, but they exceeded on what I was expecting. And I can firmly say, without a doubt, that The Last of Us Part Two is better than The Last of Us, and I'll easily explain to you guys why that is. First off, I love the fact that The Last of Us Part Two, it really fixed up a lot of the things that made The Last of Us Part One, not bad, but things that could have been better. One of the things I will say is the fact that the fighting mechanics in the first game, they were fine, they were fun, but they did come off a little. What's the word? They came off a little shoddy. There were times where sometimes when you would switch from one weapon to another, it would almost look like the game or the character was somewhat glitching. You couldn't really explore certain areas. I also didn't like the fact that you were very limited on what you could craft and everything. At times, whenever you would fight an enemy, you could only really do one thing, and that was really kill. You could either kill them or you could hold them hostage. It didn't really give you a whole lot of freedoms. Excuse me. And what I loved about The Last of Us Part 2 was that it gave you everything that the first one gave you, but more stuff. Like I love how the fighting mechanics was a lot more smoother. It was a lot more fun. They gave you um, more more freedoms to roam around, more freedoms to craft. I also loved the graphics. Obviously, the graphics were good. Also loved the cast. We'll get into the cast later on. But overall, I absolutely love the game. Also, another reason why I think The Last of Us Part 2 is better than the first Last of Us is because there's more zombies in The Last of Us Part 2. Now, in the first one, you had the clickers, you had the bloaters, and then you had the regular zombies. But that was really my biggest con when I played the first Last of Us was that I was hoping for a wide variety of zombies. and I only had 3. Well, it should be 3. This finger will not go down because for some reason I cannot move these fingers back down. I have to use my other hand because I must be double jointed. I blame my years of playing the Nintendo 64 for my fingers looking like this. Okay, so Nintendo, you did this. It was fun. It was worth it. I wish I had my 64 again, but this is what happens when you play with that horrific controller. Anyway, in The Last of Us Part 2, I really enjoyed how they made more zombies, more different zombies. Like in the second one, you have the stalkers, the ones that like that, when you go into listening mode, you can't really see them unless they move around really fast and really loud. I also love the fact that they added the Rat King, which we will get to in a bit. All the zombies mixed together to make one giant motherfucker that was so fucking hard to kill, even on easy. But we'll get to that. And so I just love the fact that they added more zombies. I also love the fact that that it started out in Jackson, Wyoming, then spends most of it in Seattle, and then with the end of it takes place in Santa Barbara, California. I love the fact that most of it took place in Seattle, just because I like games that stay in one place. Like, nothing wrong with like going cross country. I mean, that was the whole thing with The Last of Us Part 1, where they'd start off in Boston, then they went to Pittsburgh, then they went to Denver, and then they ended up in Utah. I get that. But I feel like when you don't spend a whole lot of time in one place, you don't really get to really enjoy the setting, like what's there, what places you can roam and everything. It keeps you on a very limited basis. So by the time you're moving to a new spot, you're kind of like, oh, I didn't really get to really enjoy the whole city as a whole. So I love the fact that in The Last of Us Part 2, you really just stay in Seattle for the majority of the game. It's just you go in different parts of Seattle, which I felt was a much better portrayal of the setting of the game in The Last of Us Part 2. Also, I will say the gameplay is phenomenal. I love that there's so much to do, so much to search around. One of the things I also loved about The Last of Us Part 2, especially when you got to Abby's side, is I loved the battle between the wolves and the Scars, but their real name is the Seraphites. I absolutely love that. I loved that, when you're with Ellie on day 2 and day 3, you kind of start to uncover who these Seraphites are, but you don't really know a whole lot. And then when you get to Abby's side, you learn about this whole big rivalry between the wolves and the Seraphites. I felt that was a really nice thing that they added in the plot line of The Last of Us Part 2, because it also kind of gives us a perspective of not only who the Seraphites are, but also who are the wolves, and kind of like where is Abby's kind of mindset in terms of when she's dealing with the wolves, when she's dealing with the Seraphites, and when she's also trying to like deal with her own guilt, her own nightmares from when she goes on to kill Joel in Jackson, Wyoming. Also, spoiler, I'm going to be talking a lot about spoilers. So if you haven't played The Last of Us, I recommend you don't watch this. Otherwise, I'm just spoiling the whole thing for you. And then you're going to get upset, and you're going to go bitch on YouTube, and then you're going to say how Jeff P. is the worst human being ever written, and he should like go in a hole and die. And I'm just like, I'm sorry that you feel that way all because of a spoiler. Anyway, I'm getting too ahead of myself. But overall, I love the gameplay. I love the fighting mechanics. I also really loved a lot of the stuff you do in the game, like especially when you fight the Rat King. That was probably my favorite scene of the entire game. I mean, just the fact that you're in the basement of the hospital looking for a syringe, and then you encounter the Rat King, and you got to run, then you fight him, and then and all that stuff. And you'll see what I'm talking about from the videos that I've posted on my channel. But I just really love that, and that's just a good example of why The Last of Us Part 2, in my mind, is better than The Last of Us Part 1. Another thing I felt I loved about the game was the Battle of Haven. Okay, that was on another level. Okay, that I've played a lot of video games before. I've played a lot of dark video games before. That was the first time I played a video game where I played one mission where after that mission was over, I put the controller down and I stared at my TV for like 10 minutes, just thinking to myself, what did I just experience? I experienced fun gameplay, revenge, fear, anger, loss, suffering, horrific horrors of war, all of that, all of those emotions, all of those things that can scar certain people. I saw all of that in one mission in The Last of Us Part 2. If that's not enough to make someone get excited about The Last of Us, or even just excited about that mission itself, it's just phenomenal. It just puts so much emphasis on why The Last of Us Part 2 is such a great game. All right, I've talked about the gameplay. Now I want to talk about the characters. Now, in terms of the characters, there's a lot of characters we're gonna go through, so I want to keep this I'm gonna talk a few things about them and everything, and then I'm gonna go on to the next one. And then when I talk about the aftermath of the game and my overall perception of the game, then we'll also connect back to some characters as well. But for now, I just want to focus on the characters, do a few sentences, and then we're going to move on. So first, we're going to talk about Joel. And I'm going to be honest with you, I was not a big fan of Joel. Now, not in this game, but in The Last of Us Part 1, he was a fun character. He was a fun character to play as, to get to know him, and his chemistry with Ellie was really great and one of the strongest points of the game. But I didn't have that love attachment to him. I didn't feel like I loved Joel. I didn't have this deep connection with Joel as I did with Ellie. I personally loved Ellie more than Joel. So when Joel dies in The Last of Us Part 2, I was not as devastated for two reasons. One was because I didn't feel he was a very powerful character for me. The other thing is that when he kills all the Fireflies in the first one, and then he saves Ellie, what he did is what a father would do. I mean, I would definitely do that if someone that I truly cared about was about to die for immunity. I would definitely do that in less than a heartbeat. It's something that somebody does because they're doing it out of love for that character. That being said, you knew that something bad was going to happen to Joel coming into The Last of Us Part 2 just because of what he did at the hospital at Salt Lake City. And then you kind of tell yourself okay, that was good of Joel to do that, but he left a bloody trail behind him, and I would not be surprised if something happened to him in The Last of Us Part 2. Now, me personally, I thought that I had a feeling he was going to die, but I was surprised he died very quickly in the beginning of the game. I really thought he was going to die maybe midway through the game, but I was surprised that he actually died after the first hour of the game. So when he died, I was kind of oh, yeah, I expected something like this happening. Not that gruesome of a kill. I mean, beaten to death by a golf club, but I had a feeling that he was going to die. So when he died, I was just kind of okay, I had a great time with him, but now he's dead. So now let's focus on Ellie and how she's going to Seattle to kill Abby and her friends. So now we're going to talk about Ellie, which, as you know before, Ellie's my personal favorite character, both in The Last of Us Part 1 and Last of Us Part 2. I love everything about Ellie. I love her personality. I love her characteristics. I love the fact that in the first one, she kind of brought this really joyful, happy, caring person, but at the same time, she's this can take care of herself, capable killer when she wants to be. And I felt that they balanced that out very well in terms of killer and caring person. They did a real good job of balancing that. In The Last of Us Part 2, I still got that, but I only got that for the first half of the game, because then when you go play as Abby and you play these things from her perspective, then it starts to tilt more on this side on Ellie is more of a killer, like a brutally murderous killer than a loving person, which isn't to be expected when your best friend and father figure gets killed by a stranger as Abby. So so basically, I understand why the video game producers or developers, why they went that route, why they made uh, Ellie more of the killer rather than the loving person we saw from the first one, just because of the fact that this is a tale about revenge. And a line from Spider-Man 3, which a lot of people hated, and I personally hated too. But one of the quotes that I remember from that movie is the quote that Aunt May says when she's talking to Spider-Man after Spider-Man kills Flint Marko, aka Sandman, is revenge is like a poison. It can take you over, turn you into something ugly. And that's what happens with Ellie, is that each day when she's trying to find Abby in Seattle, she grows more ugly. She grows more into a killer, less of the caring girl that we know and love. And we're begging her to please come back to that caring person. Still be that capable killer, but go back to that caring person. Don't fall into this psycho killer, because once you fall there, you can't come back from that. It's almost like once you get there, that caring person in the past is gone. Is just gone. It's a distant memory, and now all you have left is the sins of what you've done in the past. So I really loved Ellie in this game. I liked how they started off as the caring person and then go into the psycho killer as well, and then how she's kind of battling between going back and forth versus, do I want to continue on my path for revenge and kill Abby? On the other hand, it's turning me into something that I'm not. Uh, and I like, do I really want to be this person? So I love the fact that they went back and forth on that. Now I'm going to talk about Abby. And personally, I didn't much care for Abby. Like when it first came, like when Abby kills Joel, I didn't much care about her. I was just kind of like, okay, she's a bad guy that Ellie's going to go and kill. Perfect. And then, when Ellie goes through Seattle and everything, and then we start seeing things from Abby's perspective, I'm like, oh, I know what's going on. The game is going to try to get me to see things through Abby's perspective, kind of do the whole perception is reality kind of thing. And I've played games that have done that before very successfully, like Halo 2, where you played missions as the Arbiter and you started seeing things from the Arbiter's perspective. So I've played games that have done that very successfully. So I was very open-minded. I was like, okay, let's see. Let's see if I can maybe feel sorry for this person, or maybe at the end of the day, I just want this Abby character to just die. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I was not on Team Abby probably until Abby met Lev and Yara. That's when I started liking Abby. That's when I started understanding kind of her perspective and how she's also trying to balance her old self versus this psycho top A killer that everyone sees her as. And that's something that she is now, but she's also trying to get back to that person she was when she was with Owen, when she was with her friends before she went on the path to kill Joel. So I really enjoyed that as well. I also felt that that Abby's path of redemption happened when they were on the Seraphite Island with Yara and Lev, because basically what's going on then is now, out of all the shit things Abby's done, out of all the terrible things that Abby's done, it's not that she's not lost. She's close to it, but I feel like the reason she wasn't lost is because of the fact that she went on the path of redemption to help Yara and Lev, help their lives, make their lives better from what they were actually are. How they're on the run from the Seraphites, and Abby comes over and tries to help them, tries to kind of be a protective figure. And to that, I feel like Abby had the path of redemption, how she redeemed herself. Maybe not a lot, where a lot of people are going to forgive her, but just enough where people can look at her and be like, okay, you've done a lot of horrific things. I don't really want you living anymore, but you are trying your best to redeem whatever qualities you have left to make the rest of your life somewhat of a decent like character and a decent life. You got to at least give Abby that. So now we're going to go into her friends real quick. I'm going to keep this really brief. Um, Owen, I didn't much care for. Owen was like a hit or miss for me. Some things, he's really good. You can definitely find the chemistry between him and Abby and everything. And then there's other scenes where he's just kind of like he's just dull. Like you don't really care for what he says or what he do. Like some scenes I'm excited to see him, and then other scenes I'm just kind of like, okay, all right, flashbacks. Can we hurry this along? I want to see what's going on with Abby and the next thing we're doing. So Owen was a hit or miss. Mel, I hated. Mel was my least favorite character because I felt like the game developers didn't really know what to do with her. Because in the beginning of Abby's day one, you know, Mel is kind of like this innocent nurse that doesn't really have any place in Abby's group, but it seems like she kind of just tags along most of the time. And she's trying to be this innocent, like, well, why are we always fighting the Seraphites? Why are we always doing that? She's trying to act like that questioning, objective person, but it doesn't really come off that well in execution. And then towards the end, like on day 3 of Abby, she just like she starts becoming more of a condescending bitch. I mean, she starts like she doesn't she does it doesn't work for me. It just it her character in that game does not work for me. And then she's put in this love triangle between Owen and Abby, but it's not very convincing because just from all the scenes you watch, you can easily tell that Owen and Abby, they're the ones that have deep feelings for each other. And then Mel's just kind of like, I'm pregnant, but you never really see me actually talking to Owen very passionately or very romantically. We're just going to safely assume that we are together for a thing. I'm pregnant now, and now I hate you, Abby. That's pretty much how it is. So she was my least favorite, and I'm glad she's dead. That sounds terrible, but remember, it's a video game. This isn't real life. This is a fake character. Nora, I liked Nora. I really liked Nora. I felt Nora was one of the strong parts of Abby's friend group. She's someone that like knows her stuff. She can be a killer when she wants to, but she's also that protective girl. And I also felt the same way about Manny. Manny, not Maddie. Manny. So Nora and Manny, I love those two. Those were the two that I really enjoyed from Abby's group because I saw a lot of myself in those two just because, of their loyalty to Abby. Also, they're willing to do whatever it takes to help Abby. And the other thing is that, obviously they both die, which sucks. Those were the only two deaths where I was just kind of like, oh man, I so wish both they could have found a way to stay alive. Whether they go different paths when Abby decides to go to Santa Barbara or something else. But I was so disappointed when both of them died. I was just kind of like, oh, I know why they killed them because they're part of the group that killed Joel, and also this is The Last of Us, so you don't get a lot of happy endings. But it was one of those just, oh, damn you. Also, I did like Tommy in this game. I do wish they had a few more scenes that they could have put Tommy in, just because I felt that he was like, Joel's gone. So I feel Tommy could have kind of gone into the game more as like kind of like a older brother. I don't know if Tommy's older or if he's younger, but like kind of go into Joel's place kind of like as a brother figure to help out like Ellie and help out Dina and Jesse. But we don't see him a whole lot, and then we kind of see him a few times in Abby's storyline, but that's really it. I wish he was in more scenes because I like him. Jesse was a hit or miss, just like Owen. Some scenes I liked seeing him. Other scenes I'm kind of like, I get it. They're doing this to fill dead time and everything, but let's get a move on here. I get it. He's from Jackson. He's trying to connect with these girls. He's trying to be this protective brother figure, but let's move this along. And then Dina, I didn't much care for either. I mean, I get why she's in the game. I also get the relationship between Ellie and Dina, but it didn't really work for me. I didn't much care for Dina. The same way I didn't much care for Mel. It seems like they were just forcing a character with with the character you're playing just to kind of create this like sense of, oh, this is what they were before this happened, and this is what they could be after this happened. But I felt like Dina, along with Mel, they didn't really need to be in the game. I actually felt that Jesse and Ellie had a much better connection than Ellie and Dina. Very similar to, I felt Abby had a much better connection with Owen than Abby having a connection with Mel. So that's the cast. So now we're going to talk about the aftermath of the game. So obviously, a lot of people know that when this game came out, a lot of people hated this game, and there were maybe a few people that enjoyed it. And a lot of people hated this game because of the fact that Abby kills Joel. Everyone loved Joel, and then like they're trying to force the whole perception is reality on you. They're trying to make you feel bad for the character, make the character of Abby seem more like a anti-hero than a villain. So I can understand why a lot of people took that as offense. Me personally, I don't understand why this game is so hated. I mean, I understand why not a lot of people enjoy this game, but I don't understand why it's so hated. I really don't. I have a few reasons why I think this game was hated. First one is because this came out last year in 2020. What was going on in 2020? The pandemic. Okay, we didn't have a vaccine. Everyone was canceling everything because of the pandemic. I mean, plans got canceled. Everything got canceled. You had to stay in your apartment. I mean, I totally understand that. I was supposed to go to a bachelor party in Mexico back in April. That would have been my first time going to Mexico, and that got scrapped because of the pandemic. So I was reasonably upset and pissed, as a lot of people were. So I feel like when a successful game like The Last of Us comes out, I feel like a lot of people saw this as like hope, like some joy in their life that finally things are starting to go their way. And then it goes through this whole spiel with Abby killing Joel and you trying to feel sorry for Abby, and the game ends after like 20 or 30 hours of gameplay. So I can understand why people definitely took that and took it and said, this is nothing like what I expected The Last of Us Part 2 would be. Makes me angry just as much as the pandemic is angering me. And I really believe that if this game had came out, holy shit, what was that? I hope it's not a murderer come kill me. Can you at least wait until after I finish this video, then you can come kill me? Just because I want to see if I can get like a few views on here, a few likes. I'd like the life that I live in could be a little bit more than just, what is that, 0 viewerships and 0 likes. Yeah, if I could just get 1 like and then he can kill me, or she can kill me, I don't want to be sexist, then I think I'd feel very good. But anyway, I feel that if this game had came out on a regular year when it wasn't the pandemic, I don't think it would have been as hated as much as it is now. Another reason why I think this game was hated so much is because they're trying to do the whole perception is reality, see things from Abby's perspective. And I think where it comes down to for me is that this game, you either land with this game or you don't land with this game. What I mean by that is you either see the perception as reality, that works for you, and you're like, okay, I start to see things from both Ellie's perspective and from Abby's perspective, and I start to understand why they see things the way they do, why they see themselves as the heroes and they see others or the other end as the villains. And if that works for you, then you're going to be like me and enjoy this game, think it's a phenomenal game, and want to play this game again. However, if the perception is reality doesn't land for you, and you still feel that Joel should not have died, and that Abby needs to die, and Abby deserved should have died and all that stuff, then you're going to hate this game, and you're going to feel the hatred that everyone else felt when this game came out. So really, it's the whole perception is reality. It either lands with you or you don't. If it lands with you, you're going to love it. If it doesn't land with you, you're going to hate it. And the other thing that I want to point out is that, and this is not a jab to anyone, but I feel like people need to understand that what they're playing is an apocalyptic survival horror. And I feel like for a lot of people, especially in this society that we live in, everything in our society has a label. I mean, you're either a boy, you're a girl, are you a Democrat, are you a Republican, do you believe in Christianity, or do you believe in Judah? See, everything has a label, and people identify with that certain label. And I feel like when you live in a society like we do, it's real easy to see those labels and think, okay, this is what the world is. This is what the whole world is. It's all about what label do you see yourself as. But I feel like people, when they play a game like The Last of Us, they need to understand that when you're in a world like the apocalypse, there's no labels. There's no, are you a good guy or are you a bad guy? There's none of that. It's just zombies and people. And it's like, you're not a good person. You're not a bad person. You're just a survivor. You're trying to survive in an apocalyptic world. And Joel says it perfectly in The Last of Us Part 1, in the very beginning, when they're at the Capitol building in Boston, and they like just find out that like Trish has been bitten, and Trish says, you know what? Look, we're bad people, okay? We've known this for a while. We've done terrible things. And then Joel says, no, we are survivors. That's very critical when you're judging The Last of Us Part 2, because in Joel's eyes, even though he's a fake character, he doesn't see him and Trish as bad people. They're just survivors. And that's something I think a lot of times gets lost when people like review this game, is that like it's so easy just to label someone as a good guy or a bad guy. But when you're in an apocalyptic environment, sorry to keep touching myself, but for some reason I'm just so itchy. When you're in an environment such as the apocalypse, you don't see those labels as important. You're just surviving. You're just someone trying to survive to see tomorrow without getting eaten without getting killed by a zombie or by other people. So, in Ellie's case, she sees themselves as the good guys and Abby's the bad guys. And then on Abby's side, Abby's the good guy, and then Ellie and everyone else are the bad guys. But in the end, they're all just survivors trying to get through the day. And I feel like that needs to be put in consideration. I mean, that doesn't mean they've done terrible things. That doesn't mean Ellie or Abby has done terrible things, and that means that they're all saints or they're all villains. It's just you got to put that in consideration, that they are all survivors. They don't see themselves as a good guy or a bad guy. They're just trying to get through. They're trying to get through this apocalyptic world one day at a time. So that's pretty much my entire spiel of The Last of Us Part 2. Me personally, I loved that game. I absolutely enjoyed it. For me, the perception is reality definitely landed for me just because of I've played games like that. So for me, I've been through this familiar territory before. I love the gameplay. I love the characters, minus Dina and Mel. I'm glad Mel's dead. I don't know if Dina's dead, but I hope she's dead. I hope the baby's all right, but I didn't much care for Dina or for Mel. And I also love the little attention to details. Oh, I almost forgot. I also love the attention to details of The Last of Us Part 2, like the little things. Like you notice how in day one for both Ellie and Abby, how the sky is like, it's beautiful out, it's sunny out, it looks like a nice day. And then as day 2 comes around, the sky starts to get darker, and then like the terrain starts getting more aggravated. I started thinking to myself, I wonder if that has anything to do with the path to revenge for both Abby and Ellie, on how as the weather gets worse, as the terrain gets worse, they start becoming more of that serious psycho killer, and not as much as that caring person that we're so used to seeing. And I actually looked it up online, and a YouTuber actually said that this that like the game developers did that on purpose to show you that as the terrain and as the weather gets worse and worse and worse as each day goes, so does the mentality of that character, how they go more as a killer and less of a caring person. I also love the fact that because this is because this is The Last of Us Part Two. I also love the fact that at the beginning of The Last of Us Two, it starts off in Jackson, Wyoming. How it's very peaceful. How it's very like it's got a very peaceful, serenic scenery atmosphere. It almost looks like heaven on earth. And I love how then when Ellie goes to Santa Barbara to find the Rattlers and to find Abby and Lev, I love how that scene makes it look more chaotic, more destructive, almost like hell has come to earth. And I think that's a really nice thing to do. How in the game starts off, you're in heaven, and by the end of the game, you're in hell. Kind of does that nice little balance in between. And then the last thing I want to talk about um, is the fact that actually was the one that gave me some goosebumps. Was by the end when Abby finds or when Ellie finds Abby and cuts her down. Then Abby goes, cuts down Lev, picks up Lev, and brings him to the boats. I had a little, I had a goosebumps moment because when I saw Abby pick up Lev and walk to the docks, I instantly thought of the at the end of the mission for The Last of Us when Joel is picking up Ellie and getting her through the hospital to get her to safety. I saw that and I compared the two, and I was like, are Abby and Joel that much different? Or is there some similarity on how they're both trying to protect the one that they love? Abby protecting Lev, Joel protecting Ellie, and like that, that gave me goosebumps because I was like, those two scenes are very similar. The only difference is one's at a beach and the other one is at a hospital. But like you can tell just from that scene alone, when you compare them, you're like, okay, I see. I wonder if the game developers knew about this when they created this scene. I often wonder, all these little Easter eggs that they drop for us. Some are obvious, some are not obvious, and it's like, did they really did they know what they were doing, or are these kind of things that they just created, and then us as the gamers just kind of looked at it and said, huh, did they know about this? Or is this just all things we're interpreting in our minds, but in actuality, it's just a scene about someone carrying another person to safety? I don't know. But me personally, I love The Last of Us Part 2. I just finished it about an hour ago. I'm still going to upload a few more videos uh, from the Santa Barbara one just because I saved them up, but I haven't gotten the chance to upload them and everything, so I'll get to that later. But overall, I love the game. I definitely understand why it was not nominated for Game of the Year just because it came out the same year as Ghost of Tsushima, which I also need to play. I've been hearing a lot of good things about that game, so I would definitely try that out. But I enjoyed The Last of Us Part 2 a lot. It's a game I definitely will probably replay more than once. Um, and as I've said before, for me, the perception is reality landed for me. So I understood the Ellie perception, the Abby's perspective. I'm on Team Abby and I'm on Team Ellie. That doesn't really work because they go off each other. It's like saying I'm a Bears fan and I'm a Packers fan. It's like, what, you got to pick one. And I'm like, yes, for sports you got to pick a side, but for The Last of Us Part 2, I think there's a way we can be somewhere in between. And then finally, I really hope they make a third Last of Us. I am happy with how The Last of Us Part 2, how it ended. if they did make a third one, I would love to see if they either have Ellie in it or if they have Abby and Lev in it. Either way, but if they don't make a third one and The Last of Us Part 2 is the last of the Last of Us series, then I'm satisfied because The Last of Us Part 2 ended in a way that fits the name. It left on a good, satisfying, very depressing, sad like moment because with Ellie she loses Dina, she loses everything. She even loses her fingers, so she can't play the guitar. So she doesn't get that path of redemption as Abby did with Lev and with Yara. Um, but I love the ending. If they make a third one, great. If not, I'm very happy with how the second one turned out and everything. So that's my review. It's definitely my longest review, but again, I had a lot of stuff on my mind that I wanted to talk about. What'd you think of my video? As of right now, no one's looking at it, no one's liking it, so I'm guessing I'm the only one that enjoyed it. But maybe that'll change with time, and maybe by next week I'll have a couple views. But I just wanted to get all of my thought process out of the video game and everything, because now I can just move on to the next game, which will be Ghost of Tsushima. So tell me what you thought of my review of The Last of Us Part 2. What did you like? What did you not like? Comment below. And if you want to see more of my videos, just go on my channel and just take your pick. All right, guys. Hope you have a good night. That's the news, and I am out of here.